If you've never seen a 50-something woman in a floral blouse pull a knife over a Bluetooth speaker playing classic rock, I envy you. I really do. It started on a quiet Saturday afternoon. I just finished mowing the lawn, cracked open a cold beer, and put on a few Creedence Clearwater Revival tracks while hosing down the driveway. Volume was loud enough to hear, sure, but not window rattling. I live by myself, right on the edge of the Maple Hollow subdivision, quiet street, good neighbors, decent view of the hills. Or at least, it used to be decent until the HOA got taken over by a woman named Marlene Jenkins. Marlene's the type who acts like the HOA is her personal regime. She walks around with a clipboard like she's commanding a battalion, always sniffing around for infractions, grass a quarter-inch too long, one too many wind chimes, a curtain rod she doesn't like. Expect a violation notice. And believe me, she loves passing out those notices. I'd managed to stay off her radar until recently, after she got re-elected as HOA president in a meeting no one knew was happening. That's when she started targeting me. First, it was unapproved lawn edging. Then, non-compliant mailbox paint. Then she actually measured the distance between my trash bins and the curb and said I was in violation of HOA trash receptacle alignment. I wish I was joking. So that Saturday, when the music started playing, I guess it was the final straw for her. I was mid-hose spray when I heard the screech. Not a car, a person. You think this is a concert hall, Mr. O'Brien? I turned. Marlene stood at the edge of my driveway, arms stiff at her sides, clipboard clutched tight like it was holy scripture. Her perm frizzed in the humidity, and her eyes had that look like she'd just caught a teenager spray painting a church. Afternoon, Marlene, I said, keeping my tone light. Just enjoying some music while I clean up. You're in violation of HOA Noise Regulation Code 3.6. No amplified music outside past 70 decibels. I've already recorded it. 70 decibels. Marlene, I can still hear the birds over it. She took a few steps closer, heels stabbing into my lawn like she was trying to punish the grass. You've been warned before, Elijah. This is your third offense. According to Maple Hollow Charter Revision 14A, that qualifies as habitual noncompliance. That means fines and possible legal action. I shut off the hose and crossed my arms. You're making that up. There's number 14A. I've read the charter. Her eyes narrowed. I helped write the charter. That explains a lot. She took another step forward, now standing 2 feet from my speaker. Without warning, she bent down, yanked the Bluetooth speaker off the porch, and slammed it against the ground. Hey, I barked. That's private property. Now it's garbage, she snapped. I stepped forward, furious. You're out of line, Marlene. That's when it happened. She reached into the oversized bag slung over her shoulder, pulled out what looked like a folded utility knife, and flicked it open. I froze. You're threatening me over music? I asked, keeping my voice calm but low. You realize this is being recorded, right? I pointed up at the corner of my porch where a black dome camera blinked softly. Her eyes darted to it, then back at me. Her lips curled, but the knife stayed out. That camera is not HOA approved either, she snapped. You can't record people without permission. That's not how the law works, and you just pulled a weapon on me. Over a song. She waved the knife toward the shattered speaker. You assaulted the neighborhood with noise. I'm enforcing the rules. The only thing you're enforcing is a trip to county jail. I pulled out my phone and dialed. Yeah, I'm calling the cops. Go ahead, she spat, stepping back. I am the HOA. They'll back me. That's what she said, word for word. When the sheriff's deputy showed up 12 minutes later, I had the footage queued up. Marlene tried to talk over me the entire time, claiming I'd fabricated the video, that I'd provoked her, that the knife wasn't a real weapon. Didn't matter. The footage was clear. Knife drawn. Threats made. Property damaged. Deputy Ramirez looked about done with her halfway through her rant. Marlene Jenkins, you're being taken into custody for brandishing a weapon and destruction of private property, he said. You're making a mistake, she shrieked as he cuffed her. I'm the president of the HOA. That's not a badge, ma'am. I watched her get loaded into the cruiser, still yelling about bylaws and decibel levels. Neighbors had started gathering at the sidewalk by then, whispering, some filming on their phones. As the cruiser pulled away, I looked over and saw my neighbor Greg from across the street give me a thumbs up. About damn time, he said. I didn't know it then, but that was just the beginning. Marlene might have been in cuffs, but the rest of the HOA board? They weren't about to let go of their little kingdom without a fight, and I was just getting warmed up. The following Monday, I was sipping coffee on my front porch when a black SUV pulled up to Marlene's house. A clean-cut man in a charcoal blazer stepped out and rang the bell twice before letting himself inside with a key. He stayed for less than 10 minutes. When he left, he carried a laptop under one arm and a manila folder tucked into the other. Judging by the way he scanned the street before getting back inside his vehicle, he wasn't just a friend checking on her plants. By Wednesday, Marlene was out on bail and back home. Her yard lights were off, her driveway empty, and her usual morning patrols had stopped. But the HOA wasn't. Thursday morning, I found 3 envelopes duct taped to my door. The first was labeled Emergency Fine Notice. It claimed I'd violated Section 9C for possessing an unauthorized surveillance system without HOA security clearance. The second was a cease and desist letter, accusing me of public defamation of an elected HOA official. The third was a hand-scribbled note in all caps that read, "You're not above the rules." I didn't need a handwriting expert to tell me who wrote that last one. I took all 3 envelopes to my buddy Mason, a real estate lawyer who owed me a favor after I helped him build a deck last fall. He read them over while chewing on a pen cap. "This is desperation," he said, flipping through the pseudo-legal jargon. "None of this is enforceable. That last one? That's borderline harassment." "Borderline?" I asked. "Well, if it keeps escalating, it's a pattern. Keep everything. I'll help you build a case." I didn't tell him I'd already installed 2 more cameras, one above the garage, another at the corner of the roof, both angled perfectly to catch anyone approaching the property. I'd also backed up all footage to the cloud, including the knife incident. I figured if the HOA wanted to play dirty, I'd bring bleach. Friday brought the real twist. I was organizing some tools in my garage when my neighbor, Lizzie, flagged me down. She was a pediatric nurse at the local hospital and one of the few people on the block who hadn't been scared into silence by Marlene's ring. "You got a minute?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Sure," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. She stepped into the garage and lowered her voice. "Something's going on with the HOA funds." I overheard my husband talking to one of the board members. He wasn't supposed to tell me, but they're trying to patch a $20,000 gap in the maintenance budget. $20,000? I asked. How does a neighborhood with 2 stop signs and 1 park bench lose that much? That's the thing. No one seems to know. And get this, the board just approved a special assessment charge to cover it. $500 per household. I blinked. They're covering up embezzlement with a neighborhood shakedown? She nodded. I think it's been going on for a while. But no one's asked questions because they're afraid of retaliation. I didn't say anything at first. I was too busy remembering the manila folder and laptop that guy had taken from Marlene's house. If I was right, those documents were either part of the cover-up or evidence of it. "I'm going to the city," I said. "You think they'll care?" she asked. "I'm not starting with them," I said. "I'm starting with the county auditor's office." That afternoon, I paid a visit to the municipal building. I asked to see the most recent financial disclosures submitted by the Maple Hollow HOA. The clerk, a young guy with a buzz cut and a nose ring, looked up the records and frowned. "They haven't submitted anything for the last 3 quarters, he said. "They're supposed to file every 90 days. Can I get that in writing?" He slid me a form. I filled it out, and 3 hours later I had an official document confirming the HOA was in violation of local transparency ordinances. That was my opening. By Saturday, I had a plan. I called a neighborhood meeting not through the HOA, but directly. I printed out flyers and slid them into mailboxes. I told people to meet in my backyard Sunday at 3 if they wanted to hear the truth. I didn't expect a big turnout. I got 32 households. I stood on a folding chair with a projector behind me and a cooler full of soda nearby. I kept it simple. I laid out the knife incident, showed the footage, played the audio. Then I showed the county document proving the HOA hadn't filed financials in nearly a year. I showed a spreadsheet Lizzie had helped me reconstruct using old newsletters and maintenance estimates. It showed a shortfall of at least $18,000, with unexplained consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in another county. That got people murmuring. Then I dropped the hammer. I played a recording Lizzie had gotten from her husband's phone. It was a board meeting private, not open to residents. In it, Marlene's voice was unmistakable. "We'll just call it a neighborhood improvement fund. No one reads the fine print. If anyone complains, we bury them in violations until they give up. The crowd went silent. Then someone in the back, a guy I didn't know, said, "How is that not fraud?" I said, "It is." Monday morning, I walked into the district attorney's office with a thumb drive full of evidence. By Tuesday, an investigator from the state's financial crimes unit was asking questions. By Friday, subpoenas were issued to the entire board. Marlene was arrested again, this time for financial misconduct, falsifying public records, and wire fraud. Turns out the shell company? It was linked to her cousin, who lived in Florida and had been collecting monthly consulting fees for 3 years. They were laundering HOA funds through fake maintenance contracts and pocketing the difference. The rest of the board? 2 members flipped immediately. They claimed Marlene pressured them into signing off on the expenses and threatened them with legal action if they refused. The DA offered them leniency in exchange for cooperation. They took it. By the end of the month, the Maple Hollow HOA was placed under court-appointed administration. A retired city planner named Gerald Saunders was brought in to oversee operations until a new election could be held. He had no ties to the neighborhood and no patience for nonsense. The special assessment? Canceled. The habitual noncompliance fines? Nullified. The surveillance camera complaint? Dismissed with prejudice. As for me, I got a formal apology from the interim president, in writing, along with a reimbursement check for the broken speaker. I cashed it and used the money to buy a new one twice as loud, with a built-in subwoofer. The first song I played? Fortunate Son, and no one complained. The morning after the DA's office took over the investigation, my street felt different. The usual tension that had lingered like humidity in the air was gone. People who used to keep their heads down and avoid eye contact at the mailbox were suddenly waving, stopping for quick chats, even offering to help me replant the rosebush Marlene's clipboard had once accidentally knocked over. You could feel it, something had shifted. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because there was one thing that hadn't quite sat right with me, the man in the charcoal blazer. The one who removed the laptop and folder from Marlene's house the day after she was arrested the first time. Nobody knew who he was, and when I asked Gerald, the court-appointed administrator, he hadn't been notified of any official legal retrievals from her property. So I did what any stubborn homeowner with a high tolerance for nonsense would do. I started digging. I called in a favor from my cousin Rachel, who worked in a dull but useful corner of the county assessor's office. I gave her the license plate number from the SUV. It took her 2 days, but she got back to me with a name, Dennis Barlow. A private accountant with credentials, but no listed clients. His office? A suite in a commercial block that was technically still under renovation. The deeper I looked, the weirder it got. I brought it up with Mason, who was already knee-deep helping Gerald unspool the HOA's tangled financial records. Could be a cutout, he said, flipping through a spreadsheet. Someone who launders money through fake contracts. If he's involved, it's bigger than just embezzlement. And what would someone like that be doing with Marlene's laptop? I asked. He tapped his pen against the table, either cleaning it or hiding something. I didn't wait for a subpoena. I went to the office myself. The building was one of those half-finished commercial plazas with a pizza joint on one end and empty drywall shells on the other. Suite 204 had a paper sign taped to the inside of the glass, DB Consulting. I knocked. Nothing. I peered inside, saw a desk, a whiteboard, and a stack of file boxes. No lights. No occupant. Then I noticed the mail slot was stuffed with unopened letters. Most were from utility companies. One was stamped with a government seal. That's when I knew I wasn't the only one watching the place. A black sedan was parked across the street, windows dark as oil. When I turned to leave, the driver lowered the window a crack. "Mr. O'Brien?" The voice was neutral, practiced. "Who's asking?" The man held up a badge. Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, Office of Inspector General. "We need to talk." His name was Agent Douglas. He didn't say much at first, just that the HOA's financial mismanagement had tripped multiple red flags, enough that federal housing funds allocated to Maple Hollow 5 years ago were now under scrutiny. Apparently, the HOA had applied for a federal infrastructure grant to upgrade storm drainage and claimed the work had been completed. But no one on our street had ever seen so much as a shovel. "We believe your HOA submitted falsified invoices to obtain grant disbursements," Douglas said in his car, engine idling, "to the tune of nearly $80,000. I felt like I'd been punched in the ribs. "You're telling me this wasn't just neighborhood grifting?" Marlene defrauded the federal government. Douglas nodded. And she's not the only one. That man who took her laptop? Dennis Barlow has ties to 3 other HOAs currently under investigation. All of them applied for similar grants. It's a pattern. I looked back at the empty office. So what happens now? We're building a federal case, Douglas said. But we need cooperation. Testimonies. Records. Anything that proves intent. I didn't hesitate. You'll have it. The next 2 weeks were a blur of interviews. I gave statements to state auditors, federal agents, and the DA's Financial Crimes Division. Lizzie turned over handwritten notes her husband had kept from board meetings. Gerald unearthed a USB drive from the HOA's safe that contained scanned copies of doctored invoices linked to a contractor who didn't exist. Turns out that fake contractor? Registered to an address in Tampa, Florida. Same street as Marlene's cousin. They created a shell company, billed the HOA for work never done, then applied for matching grant reimbursements from HUD. The scam had netted them 6 figures across multiple neighborhoods. Maple Hollow just happened to be the one where someone refused to roll over. And Marlene? She cracked fast. Her second arrest had humiliated her. The third, this time by federal agents, was the one that broke her. She was taken in on charges of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit grant theft, and obstruction of justice. Her bail was denied. The local news picked it up first. Then the state paper covered it, calling it the Quiet Street Scandal. Reporters camped out near the park entrance. Satellite trucks appeared. Everyone wanted a piece of the story about the suburban tyrant turned federal defendant. I stayed out of the spotlight. I had no desire to be the face of anything. But I did attend the town hall meeting 2 weeks later, when the mayor herself addressed the neighborhood. This is a wake-up call, she said. We're initiating a full audit of all HOA organizations within city limits. There will be new oversight, new reporting standards, and criminal referrals where appropriate. The room erupted in applause. After the meeting, Gerald approached me, holding a thick envelope. From the restitution fund, he said. The feds are seizing Marlene's assets. The court is dividing what they recover among the victims. I opened it. Inside was a check for just over $4,000. That's more than I paid in dues all year, I said. Consider it back pay for enduring her reign, Gerald replied. I could have taken a vacation, repainted the house, bought a new grill. Instead, I used the money to fund a neighborhood block party. No HOA permission required. We set up tables, cooked ribs, played music loud enough to rattle fence posts, and danced under string lights strung between trees. And when the sun dipped behind the hills, I wheeled out my new speaker system, professional grade, crystal clear, bass that could make the pavement hum. I queued up the playlist, raised the volume, and let it roll. The first track? Bad Moon Rising. As the crowd cheered, I looked around at the faces, people who'd once lived in fear of fines and threats, now laughing, dancing, reclaiming their own street. No HOA clipboard in sight. Just neighbors. And justice. 3 months passed. The grass grew in lush and thick where Marlene's stilettos used to puncture holes during her curbside patrols. The clipboard tyrants were gone, their empire dismantled, and their bylaws shredded under court orders. Gerald's interim rule transformed into a permanent, resident-elected council, with strict term limits and mandatory transparency. It was the first time anyone in Maple Hollow felt like they actually lived in a neighborhood, not a monarchy. But the scars remained. One morning in early August, I found a plain white envelope slipped under my door. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white, clearly taken from a distance. It showed me in my backyard, sitting on a lawn chair, grilling. Scrawled across the bottom in red ink. Justice is temporary. Memory is forever. I didn't panic. I'd learned better than that. Instead, I checked the camera footage from the night before. Around 3 in the morning, a figure in a hoodie had crept up the side of my property, just outside the motion sensor lights. They never came close enough to trigger the system fully, but the silhouette was clear and the timestamp was solid. I saved the footage to 2 separate drives, printed a still image, and headed straight to the sheriff's station. Deputy Ramirez took one look and nodded. We've been hearing whispers, he said. Marlene had contacts outside the board. People who helped her file fraudulent permits, stage fake inspections, even ghostwrite those ridiculous violation letters. Some of them are still around. Some don't like what happened. I leaned forward. You think this is retaliation? I think it's a warning, he replied. And not just for you. We've had 3 other residents report scratches on their cars, missing mail, and one guy had his sprinkler system ripped out. She's in jail, I said. She can't be organizing this. Ramirez tapped his pen against the desk. No, but she can talk. And it turns out she made a lot of promises to a lot of people. The money from that grant scheme? Some of it wasn't going into her cousin's pocket. It was being funneled to companies that never existed, shell accounts tied to dummy LLCs. We traced one of those accounts to a guy named Dwight Cormer. Who's he? Private security consultant. Used to be a cop, got booted for falsifying records. He's been working under the radar, handling enforcement for shady HOAs across the state. Intimidation, fake citations, even staged vandalism. We think Marlene hired him to keep residents quiet. And now he's trying to finish the job? Ramirez nodded. We've got an open investigation, but we're going to need more than grainy footage to build a criminal case. That night, I made two decisions. First, I installed a motion-triggered floodlight that could blind a deer at 30 paces. Second, I set up a meeting with a local councilwoman named Trina Barlow. She'd been working on a housing ethics bill for over a year, but hadn't managed to get enough traction to push it through. I figured now was the time. We met at a coffee shop just outside town. She arrived alone, wearing jeans and a denim jacket, her tablet tucked under her arm and her hair tied back. You're the guy who took down Marlene Jenkins, she said as she sat down. You've caused quite a stir. I'm not done yet, I said. I want to make sure this never happens again. She raised an eyebrow. Then you're going to need more than angry neighbors and camera footage. I've got financial records, audio tapes, even a list of shell companies tied to the fraud. And I just learned the person behind the intimidation tactics is a known criminal. Trina tapped her tablet. I've been tracking HOA abuse cases across the state. Yours isn't unique, but it's the first one where someone actually fought back and won. If you testify at the ethics committee hearing, we might get the momentum we need. I'll do it, I said. But I want names exposed. Not just Marlene. Everyone she worked with. A week later, I stood in front of a packed auditorium at the state capitol. The Housing Committee had convened a special session to address systemic abuse of authority within residential associations. My testimony wasn't dramatic. I spoke plainly, listed what happened, and laid out the evidence. The real impact came when Lizzie stepped up afterward. She read from her husband's handwritten notes, the ones he'd taken secretly during board meetings. They outlined detailed plans to crush dissent, including a list of residents who would be targeted for compliance enforcement. My name was at the top of that list. 2 days later, the governor issued a public statement backing Trina's bill. Then came the surprise. An anonymous tip led federal agents to a storage unit registered under one of the dummy companies Marlene had used. Inside, they found boxes of HOA records from across 5 different communities, none of them Maple Hollow. Each box was labeled by subdivision, and inside were fake inspection reports, doctored invoices, and audio recordings of meetings where similar schemes were being planned. It was bigger than anyone thought. Marlene wasn't just a corrupt HOA president. She was the nucleus of a statewide HOA racket, one designed to extract money through fake violations, staged repairs, and grant fraud. And Dwight Cormer, he was the enforcer being paid to keep it all quiet. Within a month, federal indictments were issued. 23 people across 6 counties were arrested on charges ranging from racketeering to financial fraud to conspiracy to commit intimidation. Cormer was picked up at a gas station in Nevada trying to flee using a fake ID. Back in Maple Hollow, we held a vote. The neighborhood officially dissolved the HOA. We replaced it with a voluntary neighborhood council, no dues, no fines, no power over anyone's lawn height or wind chime selection. Just a group of residents who met once a month to talk about street repairs, bulk trash pickup, and occasional potlucks. The day the signage came down, the one that read, Maple Hollow, a protected HOA community, the entire street showed up. We took turns unscrewing the bolts. Gerald brought a ladder. Lizzie brought cookies. I brought my speaker system. We held a celebration right there at the entrance, where the iron gates used to stand half open like a warning. Someone handed me a permanent marker, and I scrawled across the back of the sign. Community, not control. Weeks later, I got a letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Marlene accepted a plea deal. 10 years in federal prison without parole. She agreed to testify against every associate involved in the scheme. Her cousin was already in custody. Dwight Cormer would face trial separately, and the prosecution was pushing for the maximum sentence. The court had also ordered the seizure of all assets tied to the fraudulent companies, including Marlene's house, her accounts, and the SUV she used to patrol the neighborhood. The final restitution figure? Over $2 million. In the months that followed, I went back to my routine. Mowed the lawn, grilled on weekends, played music whenever I felt like it. Sometimes Creedence, sometimes Zeppelin. No one filed a complaint. No one measured my mailbox. No one cared if my garbage bins were half an inch too far from the curb. But every now and then, I'd catch someone slowing down in front of my house, not a neighbor, just a stranger in an unfamiliar car. They'd look at the yard, the porch, maybe even the new security camera mounted under the eaves. And then they'd move on. Because they knew. This wasn't a place for tyrants anymore. Not the clipboard kind. Not the financial kind. Not the kind who hid behind bylaws and fake citations. This was a street where people stood up. Where one homeowner with a camera, a folder of receipts, and a stubborn streak could bring down an empire built on fear. And where the music, finally, could play without interruption.